special presentation today from Patty Cornelius and Vicki Jolley. They're going to talk about if these walls can talk. And I know they have a lot of conversations to give you all today about these walls, but I guarantee you, if there was some old sheriffs here and some old deputies here, we could probably really get some about the walls of that jail up there. But here's Vicki and Patty.
Y'all don't clap. I'm not a public speaker. I don't know how I got talked into doing this, but I didn't volunteer. So, anyway.
And I promise you, I'm not. For
So,
sure.
but here we are, and so we're going to try to make it as much fun as possible. So, now the stories we're going to tell you are stories that may or may not be true, because like anywhere you work, things happen. The identities of the people may or may not have been involved. We're protecting because, like all good government employees, we plead the fifth. Now, the first time I worked for the county was in the late 1970s. So, the stories that we're going to tell you started in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And y'all can just figure out which decade we're talking about, because we're not going to tell you.
And we
Now,
don't remember.
to start out, behind this wall is a public restroom. And if you have ever used that public restroom, congratulations, you sat where my desk was. Now, when I came to work full time, I was the only employee in the district attorney's office. If the paperwork got done in the DA's office, I was the one that stumbled through it. And let me tell you, we had a DA that was very patient. So, I could barely type back then. I was just a kid. So, we had a DA that really, he was very patient with me. History would show that I worked for two district attorneys, Bill Bell, who was the last Rockwall County, who was the last elected Rockwall County attorney. And after he was elected county attorney, a bill was passed in Austin, and he was appointed our first criminal district attorney. Lucille, do I have that right? Okay. In 1982, Nick Woodall became our first elected criminal district attorney. Nick held 4 titles of distinction while he was our district attorney in Rockwall. One, to this day, he holds the title of being the youngest elected district attorney in the state of Texas. He was 26 years old when he took office. He was the first elected district attorney of Rockwall County. And 3, he was the first elected Republican in Rockwall County. We were purely a Democratic county before that. And 4th, much to my dismay, he was the first elected county official that bought a computer system for the DA's office. It was an Apple IIe DOS-based computer, and I had to learn to use it. I hated that machine. And I never did learn. Matter of fact, that's probably the reason why I quit the DA's office, because I couldn't stand the machine. But he knew how to use it, so he thought everybody should. But while I'm on the subject, I like to include that in 1999, while we had computers in the courthouse, we didn't have the internet. Bill Bell was county judge then, and we needed to know what was going on down in Austin with some bills. So I went home and got my disc for AOL and took the phone plug-in extension cord from my home internet system, brought it to the courthouse, plugged it in, and the county judge's office then was the first office in the county to have the internet. So now if you talk to some people about this building, they're going to tell you that this office or that office was their favorite office in the office. They loved to go in there and visit with the people. They loved to go in there and see what was going on. Citizens were always in and out of this building. Something was always happening. But I'm going to tell you, my favorite place in this courthouse was that stairwell going up to the jail. And the reason why is because when my office door was open, it was a natural echo system from everything that was said in that stairwell, all the way up to the prison when they took the prisoners to the jail. So that you get the picture, let me tell you how those steps are designed. First, they're steep and they're narrow. And once you get past that first flight, there's a little platform. And then when you turn that platform, the prisoners sometimes accidentally maybe hit their head. And the belligerent ones sometimes maybe accidentally fell down the steps, depending on how mouthy they sometimes maybe might have been. But if they did fall, it was an accident. Now, I wasn't going to tell this story, but I went to the Chamber of Commerce luncheon the other day, and two ladies came up to me, and one of them convinced me that I needed to tell it. So this is a little bit more serious, but it comes from my heart, and I think it's important. In the early 80s, there was a series of car wrecks in Rockwall. Teenagers were speeding too fast, they were driving their hot rods. We had several kids that were severely injured and a few who passed away. Local citizens were coming up. We didn't have a lot of police officers then. We didn't have a lot of sheriff's deputies then. We were a small community. They were coming up and they were talking to the county judge, Durwood Wimpy, and saying, something's got to be done. You know, we got to slow these kids down. We've got to do some kind of community program so that they don't speed. And so there was a bad wreck. Judge Wimpy had the car brought and placed in front of the courthouse here. Some of you might remember it. I see a few of you shaking your heads. Well, when the car was brought up here, then people got upset. They said, well, we don't think our kids are to see that car. That car was pretty mangled. It had some blood on it. And a few parents got upset and came up and said things to the judge. Said, we don't want that car here, you need to get it hauled off. And other people came up and said, we think it's a great idea, leave it up here. So anyway, Durwood couldn't stay in his office because so many people were coming by, so he came up, and that last window over there, he pulled a chair up to, and he sat, and he watched all day long, people come and go. And at the end of school, kids started gathering around that car. And they were looking at that car, and they'd talk about it. You could see them pointing to things. At the end of the day, Judge stood up and he said, well, I was standing there with him. And he stood up and he said, well, I know a lot of people are upset about me doing that, but bringing it up here, but if it saves one kid, I guess it'll be worth my job. Well, the other day at the Chamber's luncheon, I was talking to two ladies who were there, and one of them said, you've got to tell the story about the car. And I was shocked, and she said, that car changed my life. It meant so much to me to come up there. She said, I think about that car every time I go by the courthouse. So, 40-something years later, touche Judge Durwood, it worked. It saved somebody's life. Now to go something a little bit lighter. In case you haven't heard the rumor, I'm here to tell you it is absolutely true. We did have a man ride his horse through the courthouse. He came in over here at the south door, and he rode through and went out the north door. I do not know why. I do not know what possessed him or to think that was a good idea. But it did happen. I was up here I saw it happen. Then there was the jail escape. I was police dispatcher back then. I think I was the 5th dispatcher hired by the newly formed Rockwall Police Department. And the sheriff's office had one bailiff back then who worked in the jail upstairs. I worked 11 at night to 7 in the morning. So my parents always knew where I was. I wasn't 17 years old, so they always knew where I was. But anyway, about 3 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call, or got a call on the radio, and the guy who works in the jail says, "Patty," and I said, "Yes, Jimmy." He said, "I think we got a problem." And I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "We've had a jail escape. I think we've had a jail escape." I said, "Oh, how long ago?" He said, 3 hours ago. And I said, "Why are you just now calling me?" And he said, "Well, they told me I had to sit here for 3 hours or they're gonna come back and beat me up." So I don't think he worked another shift. But anyway, they did catch the prisoners going down Highway 205. And I'm not sure whatever happened to Jimmy, but anyway.
Excuse me, Patty. I've got a little jail story too.
Okay.
Do you remember when the jail was still upstairs and this jailer happened to be a real skinny guy, and he was walking out of the big heavy jail door and he forgot his keys. So when he closed the door, he was locked out of the jail. So he called for a fire truck. They came up and put their ladder up. He was up on, there's a little walkway around the whole courthouse outside the old jail. And he went out there and they brought him down on the ladder. So when he got down, he walked around, found an open window, and squeezed through the bars.
Our jail was real secure.
I wasn't gonna say that. And so he got back into the jail, got his key, opened the door, and that's the story, but I thought it was pretty funny. And I was here too at that time, and some crazy things happened up there.
Yeah, the jail was always interesting. Now, you know, no matter what, the jail was always interesting, and that's the reason why I love having my office right outside that stairwell. Y'all might remember the TV show Bewitched and her neighbor Gladys Kravitz. Well, I was Rockwall County's Gladys Kravitz. So I sat in my office and I just loved listening to everything going on in the jail. I just have a couple more stories to tell you. One, I'm sure Lucille's heard about, and maybe she's heard about, might remember. Bill and I were sitting in his office one day. I arrived to work, and the sheriff deputy was bringing this woman in. She was screaming, she was hollering. He had her halfway in his arms, halfway, dragging her up to the jail. She had handcuffs on. It was a mess. Anyway, he got her upstairs, got her in the jail, and the woman's jail cell, if you've never been up there, is right above the DA's office. We could hear her yelling, through concrete. Well, Bill and I are sitting in his office having coffee, and in a few minutes, we see...
You were working, Patty.
We were discussing what we were gonna do, the stuff that needed to go on that day. And so, we're sitting there, and we start seeing things fall from the jail. Well, we look on the ground, and it's closed.
Oh my God.
In a minute, the jail door, you hear it bang open, and this jailer comes down the steps, boom, 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 boom. And the door closed, And then he picks those clothes up and back up to the jail he goes. Well, in a few minutes, here come those clothes again. And here comes the jailer again. So this goes on about 2 or 3 times, and finally, the sheriff goes up there and he makes a deal with this woman that if she'll put her clothes back on, he will take her to Terrell State Hospital. And she agreed, and I'm telling you, that squad car left out of Rockwall like it was in pursuit to get her back to Terrell. So, let's see here. Vicki, do you remember back in the 80s? Or Vicki?
Do you remember back in the 80s? No, I don't. The law changed about having the hearings for the mental cases. And at that time, Patty was the court reporter in the county court. So Bill Laughlin, who was the judge, Patty as the court reporter, and I had to go down to Terrell State Hospital about every 2 weeks to handle any court hearings on these, I hate to say prisoners, patients. I'm sorry.
Clients.
Yes. And by the way, when we had all the prisoners going up and down the stairs here, and our office was like right there, it was kind of creepy seeing these guys with one bailiff going up and down the steps right outside our office in handcuffs. Kind of creepy. Anyway, there was also a time when we, there was something about bringing the patients that came up, and that's when the law changed and we went to Terrell. Sorry, I messed up there.
Let me help you out.
Sorry.
We had to go down to
It's your
Terrell.
turn.
We had to go down to Terrell about every 2 weeks and they had mental hearings.
Let me finish.
Okay.
We were in having the hearing, and there was this one patient or client, and Patty had on this really pretty black dress that had big red roses on it.
Remember, it was the 80s.
And right after we went in, the judge was asking the patient why he thought he was being held there. And he said it was because God had told him that he was supposed to kill all the roses in the world.
And there I sat with those big red roses all over my dress.
So they very quickly took Patty out of the room. And she went in and put on a hospital patient's gown and came back in to finish the hearing. You looked real cute too.
Thank you. I sure I did. I know I was plenty scared that day because I was afraid of Rose would show. Anyway, there's a lot more stories that we could tell you. There's the fish story where the defendants ate the fish. So I totally still remembers that one. And there's a couple of contractor stories about things that might or might not have happened around here. And the New York story. And then there's a microphone story about a little microphone pen that was entertaining to everybody that worked up here for a while. But we're going to save those for another day. We're on kind of a short time limit today. But I've got one more story that was requested that I will tell before I turn the mic over to Vicki. So here goes. And y'all are gonna have to forgive me because we all know politics is not a good subject to talk about when you're standing in front of a microphone. But it's the courthouse and it's just the way things work. In 1983, Phil Brown resigned his position as a Democrat in the U.S. House of Representatives. He then turned around and ran in a special election for his own seat, except he ran as a Republican. Now, because things were changing in Texas and it was becoming a little bit more Republican, he traveled the state, or his district, trying to change people to the Republican Party. Well, he came to Rockwall looking to start a Republican Party that would support his election. At that time, there had not been a Republican Party in Rockwall, only one Republican voting box, which was in Dr. Sherman Sparks' office. So Phil Brown contacted Nick Woodall, who was our district attorney. Nick gathered up Leon Tuttle, Ken Dixon, Bill Sinclair, and me. And one night in June, the five of us sat at this table in this courtroom with papers spread out, coffee cups everywhere, and we formally created the what was to become the Republican Party of Rockwall, Texas. Now, with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Vicki and let her tell a few of her stories, and then I'll be back to close this up.
In 1984, I was growing up in New Orleans and met the good Bob Jolley. That's a whole different story. And we got married in '84, and I moved here with him. Once a month, I had to pay Bob's child support. And at that time, you had to pay by a check, and you had to hand carry it to the district clerk's office. Well, I got acquainted with Margie Hooker, who was our Democratic district attorney at that time. And we got to be friendly. The district clerk, who was Margie Hooker, and Marianne, I just went blank, what's her last name? Farrell. And her husband was Bill Farrell, who was a sheriff's deputy. And it was the two of them, by the way, our office was this teeny room right here. So there was one extra desk shoved in this teeny room that I was hired into. I was the third employee in the district clerk's office of Rockwall County. That was in 1985, which was my first employment spot. Then, after a year working for Margie, I was asked by Nick Woodall, the district attorney at that time, to come to work for him. Well, in only 3 months, he left to run for state rep. And Ray Sumrow was appointed district attorney. So at that point, there was Ray Sumrow, the district attorney. There were 2 different assistants while I worked there. Patrick Short, who was Patrick Westerbeck back then. He's now a well-known attorney here in Rockwall. And then came Joe Bridges, and Joe was the second assistant DA. Joe also is retired now from being a district judge in Denton County. Joe is the brother of our own David Bridges, who lived in Rockwall, and served 23 years, by the way, as a justice on the Court of Appeals. And he was tragically killed a few years ago in a traffic accident. Is that something?
No.
Okay. Then, when I was working for Nick, I worked for him for a year, and then in 1986, Bill Laughlin, who was just elected as the county judge, after his secretary left, asked me to work for him. So I worked for the county judge from 87 through 97. And, you know,
I took her job in 98.
she did. She threw me out of my job. That was okay.
Yeah, we kind of swapped back and forth. You know, we both worked for judges, so one would come, one would go. Every time there's election, one of us would leave, one of us would come in.
And at that point, I left Rockwall and went to work for Judge Andrew Leone, who's a child support judge in Dallas. And I worked for him for 21 years in Dallas. And, oh, I have to tell you this. You know, as we all know, Veterans Day is a holiday for Rockwall County. Well, back in the late 80s, when I was working for Bill, a man named Wayne Kreider was one of our commissioners. He was a vet. And I asked him one day why Veterans Day was not a holiday for us. So I think it kind of got him thinking. And he did some research, took it before the commissioner's court, and because of Wayne, we have Veterans Day as a county holiday. Let's see, what else, Patty? Do you have something in here? Oh, I have to tell you. Do you have something you want to put in?
No, you just said, I was gonna say, don't forget the story about Scott Self. You hadn't done
Oh,
that.
let me tell you that.
We were very conservative here, so y'all will enjoy this.
Scott Self was the treasurer. His office was down at the annex. I was in the county judge's office then. And Scott would come in every Friday to hand us our paychecks. And one Friday, I don't know, something came over me. And when Scott came in, he always wore gym shorts and one of those wife beaters t-shirts to come around and deliver our paychecks. Well, I said, I just had to do it. I said, Scott, you know, it really would be nicer if you didn't have on shorts and a t-shirt. And he said, well, Vicki, there's a reason for it. I'm like, okay, tell me. He said, well, I figured out that if we all wore shorts and a t-shirt, we could turn the air conditioner up a few degrees and save the county some money. So Scott was a true conservative. Oh, one other. In the late 80s, we had one janitor or maintenance person for the county. Charlie Walter, a dear little man that just lived a few blocks over. He would come in the mornings and sweep, and then he would take his broom and mop and go into his closet where he kept all his paraphernalia. And then we would miss him. We wouldn't see him. Well, come to find out, after Charlie did his work in the morning, he took a chair into his little supply closet and would take a nap. So frequently he was taking a nap in the afternoon when it was time for us to go home, and somebody would go knock on his door and say, "It's time to leave, Charlie." And he passed away shortly after that. He was a sweetie. Okay.
Well, thank you, Vicki.
Oh,
You got one more you want to tell?
you
Go
want to
ahead.
tell the story about Sue Hurdle? Yeah, it's okay.
Well, Val Morris, Pittsburgh Steelers football player, was arrested in Rockwall. He was carrying 6 pounds of marijuana. And Judge Hurdle, who was very much against marijuana, and back then it was really only illegal everywhere in the United States. So he got arrested. He was felony in her court. She was the new district judge. So she didn't let him out on bond. She kept him in jail until after he had had his hearing. And then she put him on like 10 years probation. So whenever she put him on probation, she gave him this little coin and told him that this coin, she did this for everybody that was on when they came through a court on probation. She gave him this little coin and told them that this coin they were to carry in their pocket to remind them of where they had been and where they could go if they didn't keep their lives straight. So I've thought back to that, and I've always said, you know, challenge coins were probably invented in Rockwall County, Texas. So, and that's pretty much my Sue Hurdle story. We were talking about that the other night when we were talking about these stories. I bet we can find some of those challenge coins or some of those coins from those inmates on eBay, and I'm gonna go home and look one of these days. Very quickly, I do have one story left that I probably shouldn't tell, because again, it may or may not be true. But there was once an assistant district attorney who was visiting with a newly elected judge. Now, assistant district attorney, we had the abbreviation of ADA. That's what we called them, ADAs. Anyway, this ADA made a joke about the new judge's court and the judge's ability to run it. And anyway, I happened to be in the room because I was court reporter, and the judge looked kind of shocked, and then he looked at me, and I kind of raised an eyebrow. And the judge twisted in his chair, and he said, "Son, you go downstairs and you get your boss, and you tell him I want to talk to him. And I don't want to see you back in this courtroom until I talk to your boss." Well, this assistant DA, he hightailed it out of that courtroom, and I was kind of surprised because I'd never heard this was a very mild speaking judge, and so I was kind of surprised at the ferocity that he used in his speech to this DA. So we're going to fast forward today, and I'm going to tell you that that assistant DA might or might not be a local judge now. So, with that said, that being the end of our stories, we're running out of time. God knows we could go on. I've got 100 more stories, but
Can I tell one more little thing?
sure, go right ahead.
When I was in the county judge's office, which was downstairs on that corner of the building, right outside, you know, all these trees weren't here, and the seroptimists were going around town doing good things, and they came after talking to the judge and commissioners, of course, they got approval to plant a tree. Well, it happened to be that they planted it right outside my office. And the tree was about this big. Well, it's now the tree that you can see out of this far window.
Wow.
And that's how long ago it was and how much it's grown over the years. Sorry.
That's so perfectly okay. Hey, we're just here to have a good time. With what we've all said, I would like everyone to know that I hope you've enjoyed these stories, which may or may not be true, by the way. But during those years, Vicki and I witnessed a great pride in our county leadership. We also lived through some challenging moments in this courthouse. And in the interest of telling an honest history, while still being respectful, I should say that there have been times when a few of our elected officials faced their own troubles. These were people we knew personally and we cared for them. And mentioning this is not meant to cast judgment, rather it's a reminder that even in small communities, we are all human. And our histories include the bright chapters and the difficult ones. And I'm sharing this only because it shaped this courthouse, and it shaped me too. But anyway, by the time I left county employment in 2004, I had worked for 2 different district attorneys, worked for 5 consecutive county judges. I became the first county court reporter. I was the second trained paralegal. I finished as the county court administrator paralegal court reporter for the county court, which by then had over 2,000 active criminal cases and 1,000 civil cases. We were a busy court.
I just have to say, Patty's really boasting, because I only worked for 3 elected officials.
Rockwall County had grown far beyond the little courthouse I first walked into. So when I look back, I don't just see this building. I see lives. I see a group of people that work together, bound by public trust. Some of these people may be gone, but I hope they live on in my head for the rest of my life, because I still hear their laughter, I tell their stories, and I remember what they brought to a young, innocent, simple county we all called home. I see the people who shaped me: Bill Bell, Nick Woodall, Durwood Wimpy, and so many others. And I see a courthouse that wasn't just walls and windows and WPA bricks. It held lives and it created communities. This is where I learned, where I worked, and where I grew up. It is where we laughed, where we worried, and where we celebrated, and sometimes where we grieved. And through all of it, this old courthouse stood straight right here, quietly measuring its time and stories. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Hold it. This is the kind of lecture this is all the foundation is about. 2 historians up here, 2 longtime residents, a lot of history in this room, a lot of history here in the audience. We appreciate you guys coming. Patty?